welcome to the second video for September here. We're going to get a little Halloweeny spooky this time. We're going to create an acrylic wash background and do some scene stamping in the foreground. So you can see here I've got some of the craft style acrylic paints, and it's up to you to use whatever brand you like. As far as an acrylic wash goes, it literally is just adding water to it so that it washes out. And you can create some really great patterns and layering and just some really great effects with the acrylic paint. It takes it from its normal kind of opaqueness to a more transparent paint that is really great for layering. So it's a little bit similar to watercolor, but then it is still permanent like acrylic paint once it's dried. So I started with a normal yellow, kind of like a sun-colored yellow, and I washed over the entire background except for that bottom left corner because I already know I'm going to put something else there. Then I went over with a yellow-orange and kind of created some areas where I know I want some darker colors to come in. And then there was a macaroni and cheese-ish, that's hard to say, cheese-ish colored orange in there. And they're not specific colors, it's just colors that will make a really great kind of dark, spooky, kind of sunsetty background that I want to work with. And you can see those in the beginning photos, and at the end of the video I'll put some more photos too, or even maybe the same videos or the same photos over. But so now you can see here, right, I'm drying it, and that is setting the acrylic paint, making it permanent, because acrylic paint is permanent once it's dry. It turns into acrylic plastic or a similar compound. And now I'm going in with quite darker orange and a nice kind of like fiery brick red. And this part of the process, you can do, of course, it's in the video. You're more than welcome to see it. I actually go away from this in a little bit and end up coming back in with some more wash painting, some more acrylic washing, but I wanted you to see this. I didn't cut it out because I didn't want you to wonder where some of my areas came from, but essentially I am blocking in some clouds. And I do really like this effect, and it is a great effect all on its own, but I just knew that I wanted something darker and more intense, and I wanted to work more with the acrylic washes so that I could instruct you guys and the art journaling crew on how to work with acrylic washes. By adding water to acrylic, it really creates kind of this like unique kind of transparent paint that is so great for layering over and over and over. So, that being said, I didn't cut this out, but it's not that big of, you shouldn't do it. You don't have to do it. It doesn't even really come into play in the final background. I know, crazy, right? The only part that it does end up playing is the fact that now I know where I want my other colors to be. It just helped me do a little bit of color blocking and planning, I should say. And here's where I kind of, in my head, go, you know, I want lots more. So I pull back out one of the medium toned oranges and add some water to that, and then just get back to layering my washes. And you can see I even go back in with the yellow, but while the acrylic paint is wet and you've added water to it, then you can kind of guide it similar to watercolor, and you can move it around your background, and you can blend some colors, and you can create really nice gradients with it. And then once it dries, like I said before, it's permanent, unlike watercolor. So now I'm going to do what's called the dance, right? I put some paint down, I put some water down, I lift some water up, I lift some paint up, then I put some more down, and I'm just going back and forth, playing with the colors, playing with the edges. I'm doing the dance. I am figuring out exactly what I want, where I want it, how I want it. And I am going to go back and forth between all the different ranges of yellows and oranges and this kind of like great fiery brick red that I have. And yeah, so I'm going to quit talking for a few minutes and play a little music, and you can see what's happening. Okay, and now I also did some drawing in between the layers when I really knew I was happy with those colors. And you can do that too. Draw in between those layers. Now I've got Viva Las Vegas stamps rubber stamp. I do have it clean cushioned. This one is called Early Morning Swahili in case you really like it and you want your own. And I'm going to actually stamp in the acrylic paint. And it's got this really great kind of scripty feel to it, and I think it really helps in our spooky background. I do want to say I did water down the acrylic to create another acrylic wash so I didn't have such thick paint, but I also am dipping in the paint, then stamping on my under paper because paint really pools and I didn't want big blobs to happen on my page. So I dip in the paint, stamp on the under paper once, and then with the second stamp, what's left, then I stamped in the background. And then I just heated that dry and it's done and permanent. Now my background is this very like cool kind of spooky sunset. And to really darken things up, I'm going to use some Tim Holtz and Ranger ink Distress ink from the pads. And this one is the walnut stain. It's got this really great dark tone. I totally adore it. At this point, I am not inking the bottom because I know for a fact that I want to put something in the bottom left-hand corner, but I thought I also might want to take something all the way across the page. And so why waste the time and energy to work on that area? And then actually, I do end up going back in and doing the bottom because plans change. So if you just want to go ahead and ink the whole thing while you're doing yours, that might be handy. Then once the distress ink is down, I did spritz it with water. Now here's the thing, you need to have splats. You have to have a spatter of water. You can't have a fine mist and you don't want to stream. So find that like perfect little magic medium on your bottle there and to create your spots, and then you just dry those. Now, you can see that spider web is from Unwild Studio. I already trimmed out this house because it was a lot of like little minuscule detail trimming that I didn't want you to have to watch. And then I got a piece of gray cardstock and I am creating a hill for my house. And you can see there, I thought I wanted the hill to go all the way across the bottom. And then I changed my mind and I thought I would just make it a little bit more substantial all on its own. Just one hill, one house on a haunted hill. And playing with that composition a tiny little bit, and I trim back my hill a couple times, and it's not a big deal. Oh, here's where I go back in to ink again that bottom portion because I cut out the hill. And you can see right there how spotty the water is. That's what I mean by halfway between mist and stream when it comes to your squirt bottle. And it might take a couple tries to get it right, but just it's just something you got to practice and work towards. And I decided to cut out the middle. The house has like a porch that wraps around it, and I decided to cut out that too. I wasn't sure when I trimmed it earlier if I wanted to see through it, but I decided I certainly do. A little realism goes a very long way when you're playing with this kind of art journal page or spread. I'm going to distress the hill as well. And this time I leave the bottom undone and I don't go back in and do it. I end up putting a graveyard at the bottom, and so I plan ahead this time and stick to the plan. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't do that very often, but did the distressing and the spritzing and the water and the drying, and it's just such a cool like little vintage kind of toned effect, and it really adds a lot of depth to the page. Here I've got the Aviva Las Vegas stamp, cemetery stamp, tombstones and crosses. It's a very cool stamp. Now, since we're moving into the scene stamping portion, I definitely want to give a couple tips and tricks. Things like when you need to stamp the same stamp over and over, if you can, stamp part of it half off and then the whole thing. It makes it so that it's not the same stamp over and over. You just see little portions of it and it helps create a better overall effect. Also, that being said, when we get to stamping the rest of the bottom, sometimes you'll stamp a little to the left or a little to the right, tilt it 5 degrees this way, 5 degrees that way, move it up, move it down. You don't want to create a pattern of the same thing over and over and over. We're trying to create a scene, right? So you need to make alterations, and sometimes that's as easy as rotating your stamp. I did emboss the chipboard with just some, I used I used the Ranger ink archival pad and then some black embossing powder, and it does create kind of a neat effect, but we didn't do it in the art journaling class because I didn't feel like it was that much of an addition. I love the web in the corner, but it's just fine in a flat black if you don't feel like embossing it. I did just glue my hill down, and I am going to glue my spider web down. And I'll glue my house down. I want all of those in those areas, and then I want to continue to build upon the scene that we've started. I do use a wet glue for the hill, or I'm sorry, for the spider web. The reason I use a wet glue is because it soaks into the chipboard and allows the chipboard and the paper to really bond together. And then I just used a Yoo-hoo stick on the 2 paper pieces, the hill and the house. And I'll stick that spider web down and then put a heavy a heavy jar of medium on it so that it dries. And just let it dry. A couple seconds. This is actually a couple minutes that I just trimmed out. And then we're good to get back. And I use a pen to draw a border, but that is wrong. I should not have used a pen. Here's what happens in your nice felt tip pens when you're working on textured things like acrylic paint. The acrylic paint eats the felt tip pen. So my pen is actually ruined now. I got one project out of that one. I should have used a paint marker, which I have. I don't know why I didn't use it. That's all right. It happens, I suppose. Now we've got this really great border and frame and a house on a haunted hill, but I'd really like to help set the scene. So I've got this tree, the weathered tree from Viva Las Vegas stamps, and sometimes, especially when you're stamping on textured things, the image doesn't come through quite as detailed or quite as solid as you'd like. Just grab a marker or a paint pen and go ahead and fill that in. And there's some grass, a little grass, and I'll link to all the stamps. And I stamp a little mushroom. And the really great thing I was mentioning earlier about scene stamping is you try to take parts of stamps to help create a whole scene. So I'm taking the graveyard that we've already stamped on the left, and I'm blocking part of it off and then putting another tombstone and cross at the bottom of the tree. So then it looks like the whole thing is this graveyard, and maybe the graves are just missing in the middle area. And I use the top of the tree as bushes to kind of help bring everything together at the bottom. When I take my picture away, guys, I'm lifting it up and I'm stepping away from it to kind of get an idea of how it's going and how it reads far away, because sometimes when I'm too close to something, then I don't see it as a whole. I just see little portions of it, and I like to read it from afar. Now this stamp is really cute. It's this little wooden post, and there's like an old blackbird on it, but the angle was, I just couldn't get the angle to work in my project. So it's no biggie. I just put him to the side. I did give my house a little shadow to make it just look a little more realistic. I used a Pit brush pen by Faber-Castell and Design Memory Craft. And I have these adorable little, they're zombie / skeleton gnomes from Viva Las Vegas stamps, and there's one female and one male. And I stamped the male a little bit. I stamped them off the page so that they don't look like giant gnomes, because we are scene stamping, but I wanted them to be seen. So I stamped the male gnome so his whole face could be seen above the weeds, and then the female gnome, I made her a little bit shorter and further down on the page. And it's fine to stamp off the page. You don't have to have the whole stamp on the page. Whoever said you had to do that? I did just put smoke coming from the chimney on my house. I didn't do that on the one in the art journaling class because hindsight is 2020 and I did not like it. That's all right. We're allowed to edit, right? Oh, now, so I got out a tiny bit more paint and some water, right? I'm making acrylic washes for this, and I'm coloring the windows on the house so that they look like it looks like the lights are on. And then a couple little final stamps here. I am going to stamp a moon face, a man in the moon. It's a vintage drawing that Viva Las Vegas Stamps has. And then some bats that I drew last year for Halloween. I think it was last year. Goodness, it might have been 2 years ago now. I'm not sure, but. And I just wish I had moved that moon over a little bit so that the bats didn't overlap. But there it is. Thanks so much. And if you have any questions, let me know. Bye.